serious issues, I start defending myself. Hey, I would be this way, would be. I have grown so far so well. Why should I change? So I start defending myself. I start explaining why I do not want to change. Then I start avoiding issues. I start ducking, as you use the terminology in cricket. I duck the ball. I duck issues. I avoid myself. I protect myself too much from exposition to this external risk and defend, and as a result I get into a crisis. Once I get into a crisis, if I don't change and continue with my unyielding methods, rigid systems, inflexible behavior, and not challenging the beliefs and assumptions, the decline starts. At this particular phase, and the opportunity itself started knocking on my door, if I start challenging my fundamentals, if I start looking at new methods, if I start looking at new systems, if I start looking at new behaviors, new beliefs and new assumptions, then a renewal starts. This renewal is true whether it is applicable to technology, whether it is product innovation, or looking at global opportunities, looking at global markets. Once a renewal starts happening, then you start going up the curve and not get into a decline phase. And for this renewal requirements, you need a very good leadership for the organization, a willingness to learn, a culture for learning, and a total resilience. If these things are going to be there in any organization, the renewal will start. This is where I start looking at new frameworks. So when the things were going excellent for me and there was no competition, let me link up with the subject. I had certain costing practices. I had bodies like ICWAI or SEMA and other bodies introducing my costing subjects, which was belonging to 30 years back or 40 years back also. I continue with that because my organization experimented that with a lot of success. But if I don't look at the cost management frameworks which are emerging for a competitive environment, then my decline starts. So this is where organizations today should look at what is contemporary in cost management frameworks, how is it related to managing competition, and how should I change myself in terms of the components of a cost management framework of my organization. If I don't do that, I will be fitting a 30-year-old engine or a 40-year-old engine for my current vehicle, which has to move with certain precision and speed, and as a result of that, I will not gain the required speed, and I will get into a decline phase. So the purpose of this slide is to tell you that looking at a cost management in an organization is a part of the change management culture and not an accounting issue. Such level of changes are taking place in cost management, which I will touch upon in the third building block of my presentation. Please remember here, I would like to connect you with this slide with the first point I made in the beginning about the Confederation of Indian Industry. What is the Confederation of Indian Industry doing through its leadership pattern now? It is creating a maturity template. It is creating a 5-level hierarchy of management, cost management practices in an organization, and asking its member bodies to understand this, get themselves assessed, and find out, is there any skill gap? For the current environment it is facing, is there any skill gap? And if there is a skill gap, please refresh yourself. At this point of time, let me share with you some of the very brief examples where I was a party to this sort of assessment. There is a company which is a 50-60-year-old company headquartered at the western part of India called Pune. This company is in the business of manufacturing agricultural pumps and motor sets. And now the company has got a grand vision that it should be the lowest cost producer in the entire country, because a lot of foreign producers and manufacturers with latest technology started entering into the Indian environment after 1990 liberalization. So this company's position was challenging, which was an opportunity phase. And this company is looking at various ways of improving their competitive structure. So when we went in for an assessment of this, we found out the company is working on technologies, the company is working on manufacturing facilities, the company was working on so many areas to implement its vision, mission and strategy. But if you started looking at the companies, whether the cost information was supporting this, it was this very same old mechanism of simple cost accounting statement which was not fitting into the company's current competitive strategy. For example, if I have to design a particular pump for a particular market segment, what sort of features that particular market segment wants, what design modification I need to build in, and how to what extent I should reduce my cost in which feature, and not the material labor overheads type of cost accounting orientation. If a product has got 10 features and there is one particular market segment which requires this feature, how it is linked to a pricing and how I can redesign so that it costs less for this particular market. Like for example, one important consumption market was the power, the location in which these pump sets were being used. There was an enormous power fluctuation and there was a frequent failure of the product, any product. So there was a design challenge for this company to be number one producer. A localized product is now required for the particular market segment where it still works withstanding the wide power fluctuation. Now to withstand this wide power fluctuation requires tampering with the product design and achieve the same design at the lowest cost for the particular market. Now this is not a cost accounting issue, but it is a cost management challenge of achieving that penetration in the market segment at the same time effectively designing the product to that particular cost. How to translate this? The company did not have a cost management mechanism to see that this strategy is implemented. So we pointed out to the company what sort of frameworks are required, and within 2 years they completely remodeled the way in which the cost management has to happen. They came for a reassessment with CIA, and very soon they were rated few steps higher than compared to the previous rating. For example, if the previous rating was number 2, now the rating jumped to rating number 4. So this is how the refreshment takes place, where the cost management frameworks start guiding the company. Now, why these things are required? Let me come to the second part of the presentation, where the link between the cost management and the competitive frameworks as proposed by Michael Porter. I am sure this you might have read in all your the proposed structures. Is it yes or no? Yes? So you might have read a lot about this sort of profitability explanation which Michael Porter has given by stating that the empirical research on the profit impact of marketing strategies always linked to the high volumes. The companies which have got low market share when compared to companies with high market share, it has always been observed. Companies which have a very high market share, normally their profitability has always been very high. And if you always look at what is the reason for this high volume companies achieving a very high market share, Michael Porter always came out with an explanation that these firms, the high market share, were successful because they pursued what is called as a cost leadership strategy. And firms with a low market share were always successful because they used market segmentation strategy to focus on a small but a profitable market niche. Now, whether you are focusing on a small market or whether you are focusing on a large market, if you depend on the strategies are dependent on a solid cost information which convince you that you are on a cost leadership path, only then the good strategy execution takes place. If the cost information systems do not conform to you or give you wrong signals about your exact positioning of cost leadership, that strategy is bound to fail. This is the message of Michael Porter in explaining the market share of companies with service profitability. He also went on to explain the supply side and the demand side, how they play a very major role. If you want a very, very broad market share and the competency is cost competency, then you are on a track of what is called cost leadership. If you are on a broad market scope, but you are not getting onto a cost competency, but it is because of the uniqueness of the product, you are aiming at this particular scope, a broad scope, then you are on what is called a differentiation strategy. There can be a mix of both, where I can have an integrated cost leadership strategy, where I am able to mix both by looking at specific market segments, then also the cost management comes in a very big way. So whether you are in a differentiation strategy, whether you are in a cost leadership strategy, or whether you are in a focused strategy, in all these cases, cost information system will need to drive strategy execution. But only thing is, the degree of emphasis will be different. If it is a cost leadership strategy, there is an extremely important requirement of a very, very relevant cost information structure, cost information ideas. If it is integrated cost leadership, also the importance of cost information is reasonably second. In a differentiation strategy, the innovation and the process and the technology, they take a higher sitting rather than looking at the cost information. So by and large, whether it is a cost leadership strategy or whether it is the integrated cost leadership strategy coupled with differentiation, cost information driving the strategies and execution becomes very, very important. Now, if that is so, for pursuing a path of cost leadership, what questions that need to be triggered by the leadership instinct? Let's look at 5 questions which form a building block of the second part. The first question is, what is the underlying cost inflation in our business in millions of dollars? How do we have to make up at the start of every year just to get back to square one? Do the people and the executives in our company understand what we need to do to overcome the cost inflation, at the same time create innovation and ideas that the inflation, cost inflation doesn't erode? At least we come back to the same, back to square one, and what we need to do that, whether our people understand this. So that means cost management techniques and methods are needed to even fight cost inflation. Second important question that would trigger the cost leadership instinct is, have we identified the Pareto in our business, the 80-20 rule? Are we spending enough time on the areas which give us the 80% of our results? And are we rationalizing our resources of that 20% so that we get the best out of the discretionary resources? It's the second challenge which is important. Third, for a cost leader, nothing is fixed cost. Whereas a traditional cost accounting divides the whole cost into what is called a variable cost and a fixed cost. For a cost leader, he would try to treat everything as variable cost so that whatever is gained above the variable cost becomes a contribution. What is the percentage of the cost bar are we targeting? Do we have a multi-year plan? I cannot look at the cost of 1 year. Do I have a multi-year plan? Now the fourth question is real intrigue. Are we outspending our competitors on key revenue drivers? That's a very big challenging question which needs to be addressed. Does our organizational capability plan mean anything? Is it actionable or just it is lying only in papers? A good strategic planning on cost reduction, on a long-term cost plan, has it become actionable? Whether the action plans have been developed tying down to the skills of becoming a cost leader, whether these issues have been answered in our strategic planning execution following a very good planning exercise. So these are all the questions that need to be triggered by a cost leader from his instinct of leading an organization to the cost leadership strategy. Now let me connect it with my subject. As a result of the need for answering these questions, what do we focus? How do we focus? What is the long-term cost structure we need to deploy? To answer these issues, subjects like one example like activity-based costing which has emerged. I'm going to skip this particular slide because of the details it contains and you are not able to read it from the even from the middle of this auditorium. But what all I would like to say is, the strategic approach in a typical cost management shifts from pure cost compilation to a strategic cost management where the entire process is linked to the right side. You can see what is the business model. Whether the cost management is aligning itself to the business model in terms of product focus, what channels we are selecting to reach the customers, whether the expansion of the business as well as the contraction of some parts of the business are built into my cost management plan. Whether the company's ideas of expanding into new markets and new market segments, do they make any sense to my cost management architecture? Whether the investment decisions sitting inside the business model, those investment decisions